Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing my February wrap-up. This is a day late, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I finished Uncle Tom's Cabin yesterday and just did not have the energy after that to do anything but sit on my couch and watch TV. Because, whew, you'll hear all about that in my March wrap-up though. This is the prior month. I read, I think 23 books. I read a lot of books. Not all of them on my TBR, but a lot of books, and it was a pretty good month. There are several on this shelf that I will not be taking down because it is a pain and I'm just going to point to them. So the first one is Damsel by Alana K. Arnold. This is a twist on the dragon keeping a damsel in a tower story or trope. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars and I did a full review on it. So if you want a full spoilery review, go check that out. But suffice to say, it was weird and hilarious and great. The next one was Loki's Wolves by K.L. Armstrong and M.A. Marr. This is a story set in South Dakota, first of all, which is strange because nothing is set in South Dakota, and two, about descendants of the Norse gods who know that they're descendants. So Ragnarok is coming because it's the Norse gods, and our main character is a descendant of Odin. Thor. Sorry, confusing things. Thor. He has a little hammer on his necklace. And then there are a couple of kids who are always getting into trouble in the town, and they are descendants of Loki. And along the way they meet up with other gods' descendants, and they have to stop Ragnarok. I really enjoyed this first book. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it was just so fun, and I really liked how it switched it to descendants, first of all, and then knowing that they were descendants and they had this responsibility or power or whatever. It was just a new, refreshing way. Also, again, set in South Dakota. It was kind of fun too to see how they went about traveling around South Dakota because these kids are, I think, 11 or 12, and it was just really fun. And then the last one on this shelf is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Audier, which I adored and gave it 5 stars. It is a 1001 Nights retelling, and oh my goodness, I'm so excited for the next one. I bought it the instant I finished the first one. I haven't gotten to the second one because I didn't want to read anything else until I finished Uncle Tom's Cabin, but again, whole other thing. Anyway, read Wrath and the Dawn and absolutely loved it. I loved the setting, I loved the description, the writing, the characters. I think the plot was fantastic. It was perfect and I loved it. And we have several books that were series that I finished and well, were library books. So the first two are Into the Bright Unknown and Like a River Glorious by Rae Carson, which are books 2 and 3, not necessarily in that order, of her Gold Seer trilogy. If I remember correctly, I enjoyed the second one the most, and then the third one, but none of this trilogy got more than about a 3.5 from me. It was fun, it was really inaccurate, and to be honest, if you're going to put something in a time that's that well known, I think you should have been more accurate. I get that it's fantasy, but the fantasy element played such a small part that you either have to make it a bigger part so you can be more inaccurate, or be more accurate, and I got neither of those. I didn't really like our main character. I thought she was pretty dumb. Didn't really like the romance. Thought that was cheap. The writing is fine. I really enjoyed Rae Carson's other series, The Girl of Fire and Thorns, though, and that one got better with time. This one didn't, to me, which is disappointing, but I mean, they're not bad books. They're fun 1840s gold rush era books. They didn't really do anything for me. And then I finished The Raven Cycle by reading Blue Lily Lily Blue and The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. These I also gave 3 out of 5 stars. They felt a lot more detached than the first two, and I came to the conclusion as I was reading through all 4 books that her writing style to me is very stream of consciousness, and I don't like it. So that was a large chunk of it. I'm not a huge fan of Maggie Stiefvater's writing. However, I do think the plot is really fun, and I like how the ending wasn't quite what you think. I did enjoy the supernatural aspect, I did enjoy the historical aspect to it, trying to find Owen Glendower and all that. It was just the writing, and the characters fell a little flat by the time the second book was done, and so in the third and fourth they just weren't there for me. If you don't know, by the way, The Raven Cycle is a series, a quartet, about 4 or 5 kids in Virginia who decide to go on a wild goose chase for a dead Welsh king named Owen Glendower. Then the library had a book sale in because of one of my coworkers is about to become a parent in a couple of months, and I wanted to buy them some children's books because, I mean, library sale and also it's an excuse to buy books. So I did. I bought them about 9 and then read the 3 that I thought looked cutest. So the first one I read was A Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. This one I think I gave a 2, maybe a 3 stars. I mean, it was fine, but it was kind of dull. Christmas wasn't really there all that much for a book titled A Child's Christmas in Wales. You didn't really get a lot of the Welsh culture. It was more of just, hey, here's Christmas and there's snow. Yay! So I didn't really like that one much. Then I read Night Song by Ari Burke, and this is the cutest book I've seen in a long time. I gave it 5 stars. It's about a bat who goes out on his own for the first time and figures out how to use his sonar. I loved the illustrations in this. They are adorable, and I definitely plan on buying this book for myself soon. And then the last one was Old Turtle by Douglas Wood. This one I picked up because I thought it was about sea life, and the pictures looked gorgeous. They're watercolors, and I loved them. I did give this one, I think, 4 out of 5 stars because it was a lot more religious than I thought it was. Just in that it mentioned God. However, it did have God as both male and female, which I thought was really interesting and really cool. And the turtle is talking to God. It was a little bit strange in that regard, but to be honest, I think it was a good book. I enjoyed it. Didn't expect the religious aspect, but I enjoyed it and it wasn't overly in your face. And then another library book is Brave New Arctic by Mark C. Serres. I gave this one, I think, a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the reason for that was the writing was pretty good, the science behind it was solid, he explained it very well as it was an accessible read, but it just sort of felt a little bit lacking. It's just very science and acronym heavy. Again, he did a pretty good job of explaining everything, but because of all the acronyms and because of all the science, it didn't feel quite like a true nonfiction. It felt a little bit more textbooky. So I gave that one a 3 stars. And then last library book, while we're at it, was Gentlemen Scientists and Revolutionaries by Tom Shachtman. This one was about the founding fathers and the science of their day and how they were involved in science. I found this one actually really interesting. I enjoyed it a lot more. I gave it a 4 stars. And the reason for that was, again, good writing, good accessibility. I liked how they wrote the chapters in themes as opposed to chronologically. I thought that made a lot of sense. It talked about astronomy and it talked about disease, so it did talk about smallpox and the inoculation via cowpox, and then how Washington insisted at some point on enlisted men being inoculated for smallpox, because if they weren't, they could be decimated and the British could come in and sweep them off. I found that fascinating, and I loved looking at this period from such a different perspective. Then I listened to one audiobook, which was The Fall of Gondolin by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this one, well, if we're being honest, I didn't rate it because I've learned and realized again listening to this one that I cannot do high fantasy on audiobooks. I am very much so a visual person, and reading books via listening to them is not my thing unless they're pretty simple or I've read them before and so I know what's coming. I've never read The Fall of Gondolin before, so I didn't know what was coming. I recognized a couple of names that I'd heard before, Glorfindel for one, and I think Elrond or his parents or something were in there as well, but beyond that, I have no real idea what happened in that book. So I can't rate it because that wouldn't be fair, but at some point I would like to go and read it physically. Then we have the books that I read that I would take out of a shelf, starting with City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a YA fantasy set in 18th century Cairo, sort of. It starts there and then it moves to the city of Daevabad, which is where all of the jinn live. It was fine. I think I gave this a 3.5. The writing was good. The politics were fine. I kept hearing from people that the politics in this book were super complex and they were just really in-depth, and I didn't think they were. It was pretty simple. This family doesn't like this family, who doesn't like this family, so you plot to get rid of them. Like, I didn't think they were complicated, but maybe that's just me. And so it didn't meet my high expectations. The romance didn't need to happen. I didn't see the twist at the end coming though, and so I thought that was really cool. Well, I mean, I kind of did, but not the point. I liked the twist, is what I'm trying to say. So I will be continuing on to the next one and I will finish the series. It's just not going to be a new favorite. However, We the Drowned by Karsten Jensen might be. This one talks about sailors of Marstal, Denmark from about mid-18th century to mid-19th century through World War II. And I loved this book. It is written in such a almost detached manner. It's not quite the word I'm looking for, but it'll do for now. And matter of fact, that's the phrase. It's written so matter-of-factly about just all of these things, and you see all of these characters and their families and how they all intertwine together, and it starts and you see the entire world. There's one character who ends up in Samoa. I just adored it. I flew through this book because it felt like I was there, I was sailing, I was with these people, and it goes from both men's points of view and women's points of view. Also, interestingly, it switches points of view several times in the book. So earlier on in the book, it says we, and then it switches to I when it goes into the eyes of one of the earlier characters, and then it switches back to we. But you don't ever figure out who the I is that is included in the second we, because it's not the first I. And I really found that fascinating and a new way to write a book. I loved this one, so I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I read this one because it came up in something I was doing, and I don't know what, but I read it because I was curious and because I've been hearing about it for years. Gave it 2 stars because I think while it lays out these 5 different types of love languages, A, they're not all love languages, B, this is so short to be such a big classic, and C, I don't think it did a good job in doing anything more than saying, hey, this is a love language. It didn't tell you how to really deal with living with somebody who has a different love language than you, or what happens if, for example, one of the love languages is touch. I can't stand being touched. Not at all. Human contact is not a thing. But his solution for being with somebody whose love language is touch when yours isn't is just touch them more. And I think that is a really stupid way to deal with that. Yes, I have very strong feelings. Next, I continued my reread with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. I think I gave this one a 3 out of 5. It's definitely not my favorite in the series. It might actually be my least favorite, but I love Gilderoy. I think he's hilarious, although Star Kid does him better. I enjoy Fox. I like how we start to see things coming together. I really love how the characters start to develop more in this book, and it's fun to read. It's a good, rollicking read. So read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which is the first of her Throne of Glass series. It's in these little bitty editions, and in this edition, Sam Cortland's name is highlighted in Avery River Teal ink, which is a very complicated name. But at any rate, this is just a collection of short stories following Selena, who is a infamous assassin in, where is this? Whatever world this is, I can't really remember. I should really know that, but I don't, so here we are. Anyway, I gave this one, I think, a 3 out of 5 because, again, it's not my favorite of the series. It's decent, but I think it could have done with a lot more detail, and it kind of felt a little bit skimpy. Next we've got Firebrand by Kristen Britton, which I gave, I think, 4.5. This one is the 6th book, in her Green Rider series. And in this one we follow Kari-ng, who's come back from another adventure, we'll say, and has to face another of their enemies. There's a huge epic battle in this, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of characters and a lot of things that don't go the way they're supposed to go. I mean, it's a fantasy, so obviously, but they don't go the way that the characters expect or really that you expect, and so everything just gets blown up, and I love it. I also adore Kristen Britton's writing, and I think her characters are amazing. The romances she writes are fantastic because they're not the focus of the novel. I just loved it. Then I read Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. I think I gave this one 4 stars. Definitely didn't like it as much as the first one. The writing is still good. I think the descriptions were really fun, but it wasn't quite to the level of the first one, and I think largely because the character interactions in this one weren't quite there for me. Then I read another of my favorites, which is Today We Go Home by Kelly Estes. This is a story that follows 2 women in the U.S. service, Army, specifically the Army, one of whom was fighting disguised as a man during the Civil War, and the other who has just come home from service in Afghanistan. It deals with PTSD, it deals with all of the stuff that comes with that. It does, I think, focus on some of the more visible effects of PTSD, such as nightmares or drinking heavily, alcoholism, but I really liked this book because we see through the eyes of both women, and the modern day one gets a hold of the Civil War one's diary and reads it, and it sort of helps her figure out her life. It's great. I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. Lastly, I read A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer. This is the second in her Curse So Dark and Lonely series, and this one follows, it starts out following Harper and the prince, whose name I can't recall, for about a chapter sort of to set the scene, and then it starts following Gray, who was a side character in the first one, and a new character. I did really enjoy that, actually. It's YA, so I knew the romance was going to crop up, even though that's not my favorite thing in the world, but whatever. I did really like the writing. I really enjoyed seeing more of the world and learning more about it and learning more about Gray and his background and just meeting all these different people and seeing magic in this way. I thought that was really fun. I think I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars because while I enjoyed all of that, it also wasn't that knock me in the gut kind of great, but it was good. Those are all of the books I read in February. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!